Well, the mood is a bit sour here. We're going to do our ACC Power Rankings, and then we'll talk about what happened with Clemson and their loss to Louisville. Thanks for folks joining live, as always. Join in the comments section. I've already got John upset over here in the comments about just a horribly coached game by Clemson. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's dive into the ACC Power Rankings as we do first. So I'm going to color code them this time because they're really essentially tiers now. We're most of the way through the season. We're at the very back end. We're in November. We're in what Clemson used to call championship phase. And so you really can feel a little bit more confident in your tiers. And this group I want to spend less time on than the top, I think, for obvious reasons. But this group is all very interchangeable. Stanford has been really bad. They've lost 6 in a row. And the only one of those that was even close was their loss against Wake Forest. I don't think they're very good. I don't think they have good fan support. There's almost nothing positive to say, so let's just move on from them. Florida State, you can argue they should be last. I think it's a toss-up between those two, and maybe they could even be a tier of their own because they're both struggling. I don't know if Florida State quit, but they only managed 11 points against North Carolina team they usually can handle, but not this time. And then Boston College, they had the week off. A couple of these teams here had the week off. So BC had the week off, Virginia had the week off, and Wake had the week off. Wake's going to go play Cal, or they're going to host Cal on a Friday. And then Cal, North Carolina. Maybe I should have North Carolina above Cal. Cal had the week off too. North Carolina earned a win. I don't know how much stock you put into that. They beat Florida State, but again, Florida State's really bad. But, credit to North Carolina. They're getting going. The one here that I do think is clearly above the others is NC State. They beat Stanford by 31 points. And yes, Stanford's at the bottom, but NC State is finding a little bit of momentum now after a really, really bad start. I'm going to pull up their schedule here. Not a team I particularly enjoy giving credit to, but they've seemed to right the ship. So prior to that, they beat Cal on the road 24-23, and then they come home. They face Stanford, so they face both of the newcomers, California newcomers, to the conference back-to-back weeks, and they beat Stanford 59-28. Before that, they were very competitive in losses to Syracuse and Wake Forest. So it seems, that their 2-2 start was ugly, right? They struggled with Western Carolina, got destroyed by Tennessee, struggled with Louisiana Tech, got beat pretty soundly, more or less destroyed by Clemson. And then they struggled with Northern Illinois. And then they lost to Wake Forest. So, it's most of their year, but competitive against Syracuse, and now 2 wins, and they host Duke. I think they have a shot. We'll see how much progress they really made, but I think they have a shot there. All right, let's get into some of the better teams. And forgive me if I have a cough. I was screaming at this Louisville game, doing whatever I could to help, but obviously it did not help. So here's this next tier in the ACC. And I think these teams are pretty interchangeable. I got Georgia Tech at 9. They had the weekend off. They're going to host Miami. Would be a fun upset, but don't really see it coming. We'll see how healthy they are. Without Haynes King, I don't know that I don't even know if they're in this tier really without Haynes King. But with Haynes King, they're a good team. They're dangerous, and they're at home. Weird things happen in Bobby Dodd Stadium. So maybe they could make some noise down the stretch, but they've got such a tough schedule. So I think with Brent Key, they're making progress. I like the general direction of the program. I don't know that they're a especially good team or much more than just upper half or midway, kind of middle of the pack in a pretty bad ACC. Duke kept pace with Miami for a while. They actually had a lead, fairly deep into the game, but eventually Miami's passing offense and Cam Ward is just unbelievable. He's my pick for the Heisman. I think he will win the Heisman. I think he should win the Heisman. Threw for 400 yards. He's great. 5 touchdowns, 400 yards. He needs to win the Heisman. But Duke kept pace, and almost that is kind of impressive. Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech is without Kyron Jones, their quarterback, and Bashal Tutin, their star player, their running back. They had a 21-3 lead, and they blew it and lost in overtime to Syracuse. But I don't want to penalize them too much, so I only drop them from 5 to 7 here because they're without, their two most important offensive pieces. So, not a great loss, and they're not having a great season, but also you have those kind of injuries, can be hard to win. Syracuse earns a big win, and for them, 21-3 comeback is great, but to do it in November when they always collapse, instead of collapsing, you come back. I think that's big for their culture. They have the same record as Clemson. They're 6-2. So kudos to Syracuse there. I think they're a solid team. I think Clemson benefited by not playing Syracuse, right? That's a lucky break for Clemson. So this next group, I actually have Clemson down to 5. I had them 1, dropped them all the way to 5, and here's why. And we'll talk about this more when we get to the Clemson review, the Clemson Louisville review. But they look like a poorly coached team. They're not out talenting good teams, right? So they were 11-1 in their last 12, but those wins were against mostly bad teams. They had the good Notre Dame win, which is the first of those 12. They beat a collapsing UNC. They beat a 7-win Kentucky. Those were all last year. This year, their best win was at Wake Forest, a fringe bowl team. That was their best win. So it's good that they looked really good against Wake Forest. They didn't actually look that good against Virginia or Stanford or Florida State. It's nice that they looked really good against NC State. But otherwise, you're assuming that beating bad teams pretty badly means they've taken big steps, right? They destroyed App State. And you're like, hey, maybe that they figured something out on offense. Maybe Georgia kind of hit them so hard they fixed them. Well, now they've played kind of an upper middle class team in the ACC, and you realize that's actually all Clemson is. Clemson's in the mix with a Louisville, with a Pittsburgh. If Clemson plays Louisville 3 times, they win 2 of them, maybe, but they also lost a home night game to them. So I don't even know that I would say that. Clemson looked like a very poorly coached team that didn't have the talent to overcome that against Louisville or really even come close. And then Pittsburgh, they took a pretty bad loss. SMU just jumped on them and blew them out. Really, really impressive by SMU. Mustangs win 48-25. They had 6 turnovers in their prior game. SMU had 6 turnovers last week against Duke, 3 of them interceptions by Kevin Jennings. And they were very, very fortunate to win that Duke game. But that sets them up to win the ACC possibly, or at least give Miami a battle because they bounced back big time. Kevin Jennings, 306 yards, 12.2 yards per pass attempt, and 2 pass touchdowns. Absolutely incredible. So with that, here is our number 1 and number 2 teams in the ACC. And I had SMU number 1. So Clemson was number 1. Miami was number 2 last week. Miami stays at number 2, and that's not a knock against them. I just think SMU's earned it. SMU got a dominant win against Pittsburgh, while Miami got another offensive shootout win over Duke this time. John in the comments saying that Pitt looked awful. And that's fair, right? Maybe I debated. I see your point here, John. I debated, do I put Pittsburgh above Louisville? I had them above Louisville at the beginning. And I thought about it and said, I would, without hesitation, pick Louisville to beat Pittsburgh. I don't know that Pittsburgh is that good. I think Clemson will be favored when they go to Pittsburgh. At this point, I don't know who I'll pick in that game. So the 3-4, that's why they're color-coded. That's why they're tiers. The 3-4-5 are pretty interchangeable. And the 1-2 are interchangeable. And Miami fans are going to crush me in the comments. And that's certainly fine. Let me know what you have to say. But I think SMU is the most deserving to have that the early struggles against Nevada and the early loss against BYU. But they fixed their offensive line. They switched their quarterback. They are dynamic. But I think their defense might be a little bit better than Miami's. They look a little bit more consistent. And now they've got probably the best win in the conference. It's close. I mean, Miami had a very close win over Louisville, which, Clemson couldn't beat Louisville. So kudos to Miami for beating Louisville. SMU destroyed Pittsburgh. I think that's a little bit more impressive. So I'm giving credit to SMU for that. Miami will probably be favored. These could go either way. And SMU does have lost to BYU, but has Miami played anyone as good as BYU? Right? So I think those top 2 are pretty interchangeable. But yeah, so Clemson drops to number 5. And with that, let's dive a little bit more. Let's talk Clemson. Oh, is my camera funny? Hold on. Sorry about this. Never done this before. Yes, Tiger Pride really could have used some added depth at defensive end. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's go ahead and let's dive into Clemson here. Sorry about my camera. I don't know why it's blurry. I might just have to. All right. Well, it is what it is. Let's see. I can't really roll. There we go. Okay. I see it focusing now. Sorry about that. Sorry to do this live. This is the risk of going live. Okay. Looks like we're fixing. Okay, it's settling in. Okay. So I was really surprised. Let me back up. I love these comments. Thanks for keeping them coming. I'm gonna fix this here. There we go. Okay. So let's dive in. Let's talk about Clemson's loss to Louisville. I'm going to just go ahead and put this up. My camera's not working well anyway, so I'm going to show this. Here we go. So Clemson outplayed, outcoached, just thoroughly beaten by what looked to be a superior Louisville team. They had probably about equal quarterback play, but much better line play and much better coaching. And it was 33-21 loss. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but frankly, it wasn't fluky. And that's what's so disappointing. A couple things to hit on. But first, let's talk a little bit of the kind of the big picture here. And that's Clemson was 4-4 last season, 8 games into the year. They were 4-4. That was kind of rock bottom, right? And so from then, they didn't collapse. They won out. They won 5 straight, including that big upset win over Notre Dame. And that's great, right? And we thought, hey, they figured something out. Coach Sweeney has rallied them because they have the strong culture, and look at them go now. And that's great, right? The Notre Dame win, it was great. Beyond that, they beat a collapsing North Carolina, and they beat 7-1 Kentucky. So it was beating up on mostly bad teams and a great Notre Dame win. Don't undercut that. And then this season, they lose to a very good Georgia, which honestly is fine, right? I mean, the way they lost isn't fine, but losing to Georgia is very much forgivable. And then they won, 6 in a row after that. So that's their other 6 wins, right? So that's how you get to 11-1. If you look at those, though, the best win this season, a road win at fringy bowl team, Wake Forest, right? So even all these wins, the only really good one is Notre Dame. Maybe Kentucky, which was a shootout that neither team looked so good on and didn't have their best players in a kind of meaningless bowl game. So Clemson's beating up on bad teams. That's their 11 wins. Well, here comes Louisville. Not great. They have 3 losses, but a good quality upper middle class ACC team. Let's just prove that this progress is real. Clemson's won 22 straight home night games. Clemson has beaten them 8 in a row. Clemson's a 10-point favorite. So honestly, I was fairly confident. I figured they'd win by 10-14, right? I thought I respected Louisville. I thought they were dangerous, but if Clemson played even a B game, they should win. Well, Clemson played an F game. And now I also wonder, was that an F game or is that like their D game and they don't, their A game is not as good as you think it is. Maybe they're not as talented or well coached as you think. And here's some of the biggest reasons. Inability to stop the run. And here's where I want to get into some of the comments because I think they're pretty spot on. Let's see. Tiger Pride, really spot on comment. Really could have used some added depth at defensive end. And we said it all offseason. I absolutely did. I know you did, Tiger Pride. I know so many people did. It was a very obvious place where they needed a one transfer. You don't need the whole Florida State remake. You need one guy, right? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a starter. But the problem is they moved Peter Woods to defensive end. He's very good there, but he's better inside. So you've already kind of undercut him a little bit, but fine. You do want him and Capehart and Peyton Page, perhaps. Maybe you want them on the field together anyway. Fine. Well, as soon as Woods goes down, you have no depth. Denhoff is not a guy you want to be using for that amount of snaps. Clemson didn't get any sacks. There was very little pressure. They don't set the edge well. And they allowed 210 rushing yards with 7.8 yards per carry allowed against Louisville. I mean, that is atrocious. And now on the year, they're 59th nationally, allowing 140 rushing yards a game and 4.61 yards per carry. They are a bad rush defense. And that's something you never see at Clemson. And they've got the talent, so it's inexcusable. I thought getting rid of Lemansky Hall, I didn't like the hire at the time. They made it prior to 2018, Clemson's best year, because they could, right? It was a move where Clemson was getting that 10th position coach, and Dabo hired someone he played with who didn't have a lot of coaching pedigree. And defensive end play has really never been the same. Well, they bring in Chris Rumpf this year. And, we talk about Matt Luke and how that's such a great hire, and it is. Well, I think you got to be fair and say this Chris Rumpf hire, it hasn't gone well so far. The defensive ends aren't getting a lot of sacks. They're not setting the edge well. And Coach Sweeney specifically offered him, hey, do you want to transfer? Because Adam Kisai's scholarship is now open because they brought in a freshman who immediately transferred out before the season even started. And he said, no, I'm happy with our depth and what we got. And he was wrong. The depth is not sufficient, right? If you had, and I don't know that they could have brought in a huge, big-time impact defensive end. But if they could have, they should have tried, right? Because maybe that's the difference in this game. Maybe they look a lot better against Stanford. Maybe they look a lot better against Georgia. This has been a problem. I think that's part of it. Let me see any other comments on this topic before we move on. John Sarian, he seems to disagree. Yeah, I disagree with you. I think defensive end has been a problem all year. Is that the only issue? No. Offensive line really struggled in this game. And we're going to talk about some other issues. But defensive end is an area that could have been better. And if Peter Woods is out for a while, I think you're going to see that kind of consistently moving forward. It's going to be a problem. Another thing, and this is where we get into coaching. Clemson had 2 field goals blocked. That swung the game. They had right before halftime. There's under 2 minutes left. They have a field goal blocked. Would have been a long field goal. No guarantee it's going in. But if it is, it's 10-10 at halftime. Instead, it's blocked. Louisville gets the ball on Clemson's side of the field, and in 1 minute they go down and score, and now they're up 10. Huge swing of momentum. Then later in the game, well, we'll talk about that in a second because I want to hit on this next one and poor coaching game management. But there was 2 field goals blocked. That's now 4 on the season because 2 of them were blocked against Florida State. Clemson failed to correct it. That's on the coaches. That's 25% of all field goal attempts have been blocked. That's 4 out of 16. That's insane. That is absolutely incredible. Just horrible execution from special teams. Has to get better, or had to get better after Florida State, and it didn't. And I think it's a huge reason Clemson lost this. Yeah, they need to be more serious about special teams. Special teams, quite frankly, has generally been bad under Coach Sweeney. Going all the way back to the 2015 national championship when they lost an onside kick and when they gave up the kick return, right? So it was the Kenyon Drake kick return, in 2015. Sweeney's got to figure this out. You got to fix special teams. It cost us the 2015 national championship. I know. I actually mentioned that to him at a growl and prowl in Atlanta, and he got upset and said, no, it was poor secondary play. It can be multiple things, right? Special teams was a big part of this loss too. Yes, and John, just to be fair, want to share your comment here. It was special defensive end was weak, but not a primary problem. The horrible misplay and the loss is on point. Okay, so let's talk about the poor coaching then. So Clemson gets the ball with a few minutes, about 3 minutes or so to go in the third quarter, and they meander their way downfield. They're down 19, and they take their time, and they don't hurry at all. They're burning clock going down below 15. A lot of times you see teams snap it at 15, like right after 15, because that's when the radio turns off. So they'll use all that time to talk, and then they'll snap at 15. Fine. They were sometimes going below that. They were never hurrying. It was incredible. The total lack of urgency felt like they didn't care about winning the game. It was extremely frustrating. They get down to the 11, and the offense just bugs out, and they decide to kick a field goal, and it gets blocked. So instead of you're down 19 and you try to cut it to 16, which, that's 2 touchdowns, 2 2-point conversions. It's not totally crazy, but I think a little cowardly to kick the field goal there. And then to miss the field goal, to me, that's kind of where the game was pretty much over. But Clemson gets a very quick 3 and out. They get the ball back. Say, okay, if you can go down and score quick, get a touchdown, this thing could be down to, 11 points, right? That's what you're thinking. Cut it to 11. You need a touchdown, a field goal. You could win this, right? Well, they again take their time. They're taking clock down to sometimes it was like 1 second. Like there was almost a delay of game, although the clock was stopped on that particular one. But really struggling to get Again, the calls in just really, really poor. They get the touchdown. They don't go for 2, so they cut the lead to 12, which doesn't really help them because you still need 2 touchdowns to do anything. If you can cut it to 11, if you go for 2, cut it to 11, then you get the ball and score again. You go for 2, you cut it to 3, field goal ties it. But in this case, whether you're down by 12 or 13, who cares? You need 2 touchdowns to win. But you don't give yourself an opportunity to tie with a 2-point conversion and a field goal. It makes no sense. It's just a math error. When asked about it afterwards, Coach Sweeney said they didn't even consider it. So it seems, I don't know. It just, yeah, John, this is the only thing I can think of. It was like Dabo had given up. And I mean, Clemson probably wasn't going to come back anyway, but it didn't seem like there was a desire to win. The fire wasn't there, and that's what's so frustrating. So when I go big picture, let's see if the camera's okay. Yep, now the camera's great. Okay, so when I think when I think big picture about this, the other bad losses, the ones in last season that got Clemson to 4-4, in those or after those losses, we could always say, hey, Clemson's got to hire a better defensive ends coach. They got to hire a better offensive line coach. The year before, it was like, hey, you can't have your longtime assistant, Brandon Streeter, as the OC. Go hire an elite OC. And we complained about these things, and Dabo was always slow to do it. When they hired Streeter, people didn't love that. They wanted you to go out and get a Garrett Riley. And it took him, and he sort of wasted a year and then did what the fans wanted, and the fans were right? And this happened a lot, right? So you had those 3 are just a couple. Well, that's been done. Dabo's done basically everything that the fans have correctly said he should have done, 1 or 2 years prior to him getting to it. And it's not fixed. So what's the issue? Is it talent? Is this not possible to really compete at a high level without using the portal? Maybe Clemson isn't going to ever be able to compete with Ohio State and Georgia and the top dogs unless they start playing the game in the portal. And that's really disappointing because it seemed prior to this game that they had actually found a way to do college football in a better way and still compete at a top level. Maybe not quite with Georgia yet, but maybe in the tier of, not top 4, 5, 6 teams, but still in the 7 through 12 kind of range of being really, really good, having an outside shot to play for a national championship and do it, without having to buy players. Maybe that's not possible. Maybe Clemson's just not going to be that good until we get to revenue sharing where NIL payments aren't such a driving factor. We'll see. I don't know. Maybe it's a bad game and they dominate Virginia Tech and they win out. I don't think that's going to happen. I think South Carolina is better than Clemson, quite frankly. They look better. They're better defensively. And Clemson's offense is now proven unreliable. Clemson's offense has played 2 good teams. They played Louisville. They didn't score a whole lot. They scored 21, and most of those are in garbage time when Louisville was letting them get yards and just burn clock. And Georgia, who they couldn't get a touchdown on, right? So Clemson's offense has not done anything against any good teams. Yeah, John, Clemson's loss has nothing to do with talent. Even some of the youth at wide receiver were getting downplayed down the field. Middling defensive end play. This team has the caliber to play so much better. Yeah, and I get that. But we just got an NFL defensive ends coach, and the defensive ends aren't good. We brought in 5-star talent at wide receiver. I mean, I guess you could blame Grisham, but they were great before this. I don't know. I guess that's the one that makes the most sense. Defensive line, Nick Eason seems like he's a great coach, and they didn't do so well. So I don't know. I mean, are we going to fire everyone? I don't think so. Wes Goodwin should definitely be getting a little talk now. Like the guy, didn't totally well. The hire was confusing for sure, but seemed like it was going okay. They did lose a lot, so I expected the defense to take some drop. This seems like too much of a drop off. So I don't know what's next. I don't know what the correct thing is. In past years, it was always, hey, you got to get DJ out of there. You got to bench him, or you got to get a real offensive line coach. There was always, or a better offensive coordinator, a new scheme. The scheme is stale. There was always something, but now I don't. If it's not the portal, then I just don't know what else it is. And so that's why this one is almost more disappointing in some ways. Tiger Pride here saying, yeah, the best team in the ACC, although I actually have SMU as number 1 in the power rankings. I'm not sure if you saw that yet, Tiger Pride. But nevertheless, Miami, yeah, they've got a transfer quarterback. He's going to win the Heisman. And maybe some level of portal is necessary to be competitive. I think that's right. Can Clemson do it with 1 to 2 guys? Can they maintain a culture while still bringing 1 to 2 guys? Can you bring in 1 to 2 guys and not pay them hundreds of thousands more than guys already on the roster? Do you screw up your entire sort of financial system? I don't know. John's disagreeing with you. He's saying FSU hammered the portal again, and it's no good. It's not a total fix. Is there a middle ground, guys? Right? Is there a middle ground? I don't know what else there is for Clemson. Clemson's done everything that we thought they should do. It seemed like the progress was real. Now it seems like that progress was illusory. The only thing they haven't done is use the portal, right? Let's briefly talk a little bit about Virginia Tech now. So the Hokies lost themselves. They lost to Syracuse. Pretty brutal loss for them. They were up 21-3, blew that game and lost it in overtime. They are now 5-4 with losses to Syracuse, to Miami, to Rutgers, and a season-opening loss at Vanderbilt. Of course, the Miami loss is pretty forgivable. It was close, and it ended on a very iffy call. The Vanderbilt loss was on the road, and Vanderbilt's actually good, and it's an opener. And Syracuse is on the road. It's in overtime. So I think Virginia Tech's a decent team. The thing is, their loss at Syracuse happened when they didn't have their quarterback, Kyron Drone, and they didn't have their star player, the star offensive weapon, Bayshall Tootin. So without them, I think Clemson wins, kind of going away. It's a 3:30 ESPN game. If they're back, I think it's going to be really close. Virginia Tech is better defensively on a yards per play basis than Clemson. Without Drones, without Tootin, their offense is going to be bad. But we got to see what Clemson's offense does against, frankly, a real opponent. They can put up crazy numbers and throw 70-yard bombs to Wesco against App State and NC State. But what do they do against a halfway decent team? We frankly still don't know. Well, we know a little bit, and it hasn't been good. So I think it'll be an interesting test. I do still lean towards Clemson winning, but at the beginning of the season, I picked Clemson to go 10-2. They've got their 2 losses already. One of those losses I predicted was at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's not quite as good as I thought. Certainly, I'm not going to pick that if they're without Kyron Drones and if they're without Bayshall Tootin. We'll see if they're back. In some ways, I hope they're back because I want to learn more about Clemson. I don't want Clemson to get just a bunch of free wins and feel good about themselves. Yeah, John, thanks for coming in with these comments. Yeah, the wins at Virginia Tech and Pitt, I care about so much less than South Carolina. That'll, you play to, right? The goals are win the opener, play for the championship, used to be win the division, win the championship for your conference, win the state championship, and win the closer. Well, they didn't win the opener. They're not going to play for the ACC championship, most likely. They are very, very unlikely to win the ACC championship. So the state championships are what counts at this point. I'd frankly rather lose to both Virginia Tech and Pittsburgh than lose to South Carolina at this point, especially because of in-state recruiting. Feels like Beamer's grabbed a lot of momentum in the state. And they're a little bit more aggressive in the NIL and recruiting. Clemson's going to have to figure that out. And a loss to South Carolina is not going to hurt, or it's not going to help. So that's a really crucial game. That's the one, frankly, the only one now that I'm really looking forward to. Do want to end on a more positive note, though. Hope you guys will stick with me through this part. Just want to quickly, Monday, Clemson basketball gets underway. So, you kind of turn the page a little bit, at least, on football being this disappointing. Clemson basketball, I think, is going to be really good. They lost a lot. Let me see if I got that on the next slide. Yeah, they lose a lot with PJ Hall. He's gone leading scorer. Joe Girard set the record for 105 3-point shots made in a single season. That's the record. Jack Clark, decent defensive player. RJ Godfrey, tough, strong, good rebounder who can make some plays around the basket. And then a couple other guys all depart. But Brownell, and this is why I love Clemson basketball so much, Brownell has not accomplished anything close to what Dabo has, and I don't want to imply that he has. It's not in the same ballpark, but he is doing everything in his power to help Clemson basketball become a better program, to win now and to grow as a program. So when people think of Clemson basketball, they think, oh yeah, they're in the tournament a lot. Yeah, they're pretty good. I should consider going there if I'm a top athlete. He's doing everything in his power that is ethical to get Clemson there. In this offseason, he lands Boston College's one of their two best players, their best guard, Jaden Zachary. So Jaden Zachary scored 40 points in 2 games against Clemson, and now he's on Clemson. That's a big add. Victor Lakin comes in transfer, big guy. I think he's 6'11". He's from Cincinnati, originally from Russia. He's going to help. He's not going to solely fill in for PJ Hall, but he's going to take a starting spot, and he's going to be a big part of filling that big void. Miles Foster, some older folks are going to remember, he is like a Charles Oakley type. He's only 6'7", but he's going to play power forward because he's really strong. He can fight. He's actually a better rebounder than PJ Hall was based on rebounding percentage. He's 245 pounds, a lot of muscle. He's going to probably come off the bench, but I think he's going to be a great option off the bench. And you're going to see him play plenty as maybe like the first big man off the bench. Christian Reeves comes in from Duke, a 7-footer. I think he's more of a long-term guy. He's not a one-and-done transfer. I think he'll see a little bit less minutes, but still be relevant. And then you have Dell Jones. You have Dallas Thomas, Ace Buckner, all freshmen. I think Dell Jones is the one who could play a little bit, kind of take Josh Beadle's role. And then one guy I'm honestly, maybe the guy I'm most interested in seeing in the opener is Jake Heidbreder. He came over from Air Force. He led Air Force in points with 15 points per game. And he's a great 3-point shooter. He's going to be a real weapon off the bench, but he's more than like an Alex Hemingway in that he can also attack the basket. He's got size. I think he can do a lot more. He was hurt last year, had some sort of lower body injury. Well, if he's healthy now, this is a much deeper team. And let me go back to this roster. This is a much deeper team than we had last year. And I don't necessarily know if it's as good because you don't have Gerard, you don't have Hall, but the depth is there with Lakin and Reeves at center, Shefflin and Miles Foster. That's a really, really deep front court. Is it as good as Shefflin? Are there any two guys there as good as Hall Shefflin? Maybe not. But if Shefflin can take the step, because Shefflin was Clemson's most efficient player last year. Bar none, the most efficient player, not even particularly close. It's more efficient than actually almost any player going back several years. But he was 6th on the team in percent shot, which is to say his field goal attempts divided by the team's field goal attempts while he was on the court was actually only 6th. So the offense did not run through him. He was not a top scoring option. He just managed to get the ball and get it in very, very efficiently. Well, now there's going to be some offense run for him. So can he keep a decent amount of that efficiency? That's what we're going to have to figure out. Chauncey Wiggins is a guy who I think has a lot of upside. He was good last year. Now he's going to get a full runway to start from the get-go, or at least you would think so. He's got a ton of upside. I really like him. We'll see. He's got to get his 3-point percentage maybe just a little higher, get a little bit closer to 40%. Jaden Zachary is a 40% 3-point shooter. Heidbreder was 39.9. So essentially they're both 40% 3-point shooters. Zachary's not much of a volume guy from 3. He's more of a slasher, just like Chase Hunter, more of a slasher. And one of the biggest questions on this team, Chase Hunter, he was unbelievable in the tournament. He actually is a regular season regressed from the year prior. So he's back for a 6th year. If he repeats last year's regular season, this team will be limited. If he's the guy that played in the NCAA tournament, they're going to be incredible. If he's somewhere in between, they could be very good. They should make the tournament. His 3-point percentage has got to get better. He was only 31% last year. He's closer to 35 in years prior. He needs to get back to that. If he could be a 37, 38% guy from 3, this Clemson team is going to be really dangerous. So really love the roster. Think there are big things ahead for this Clemson basketball team. Here's the projections. Last year they were 21-10, 11-9 this year. Essentially predicted the same. They're 24th in KenPom coming into the year. ACC is a little weaker because of SMU, Cal, and Stanford. So they're saying a little bit more wins than the ACC, a little bit fewer non-con, where they do have Kentucky and Memphis and Boise State, so some tough teams. But I think this is a team to be excited about. And with football not really having much to play for, aside from the state championship, tune in Monday against Charleston Southern. Stay locked in because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Let's see these comments before we get out of here. John asking about the non-conference schedule. I'm going to pull it up so I can give you a better analysis. But Kentucky's the headline. They play Kentucky on a Tuesday at home. And Clemson's expected to win that game, to be quite honest, to be frank. Boise State on the road on November 17th. That's going to be a tough one. Kentucky at home on the Tuesday after the South Carolina game. Ken Palm actually gives Clemson a 71% chance to beat Kentucky. Then they get Miami in this weird like ACC game before non-conference play starts. And then they'll go Memphis at home on December 14th. That's a big game. It's a good team. And then South Carolina on the road. Clemson very slightly favored, 53% chance to win according to Ken Palm. So, not a murderer's row. There's definitely, let's see, Charleston Southern, St. Francis, Eastern Kentucky, Radford, and Florida A&M. So there's a couple cupcakes in there, but I think you want that. But I think a pretty solid non-conference schedule. And totally agree here with Tiger Pride and with John. Just Brownell uses the portal extremely well. No one's expecting Dabo to do it to the same extent. Can he do it just a little bit? And I think that's the thing again about Brownell and Clemson basketball: the pedigree, the history, the local talent for basketball at Clemson is nowhere near where it is for Dabo and that football team. The expectation should not be the same. But I just trust that Brownell is doing every single thing in his power to make Clemson win, and that's why they're so fun to cheer for right now. So get on board with them. If you're frustrated with football, don't forget we do have Clemson basketball starting this week. As always, appreciate everyone watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Always helps. Let me see if there's any last comments. No, nothing else. Hey, thanks for watching. As always, go Tigers. If you enjoyed this video, please help this channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Also, if you're a pet owner and you live in the upstate, check out our sponsor, Ready Vets. They offer immediate walk-in care when your pet can't wait. They're open 7 days a week till 10 p.m. They're owned by 2 Clemson grads. They're located in Taylor's, just 10 miles from the Woodruff Road shopping district.